Hi, wonderful people. I'm Leah Rapaner. As a sociologist, University of Melbourne professor, founder of the Gender Equity Initiative, director of the Future of Work Lab, woman, wife, and mother, I've made it my life's mission to take down every ridiculous gender myth out there. Together, we'll deep dive into the research to get to the bottom of all these misperceptions that are holding all of us back. Don't worry, I've studied these types of questions for decades, and after publishing countless articles exactly on these topics, I know when they are nonsense or real truths. And I'm going to help you learn that too. So here we go. Let's do it. This is Misperceived. We know you love the content, and so we're here to give you more. Just wanted to let you know, we've got some bonus episodes coming. These are interviews all about the mental load with experts in the field. And I don't just mean me, although of course I'm in there too. But we're working with New America and Haley Swenson there. We have Avni Patel Thompson, Verity Tuck, Eve Rodsky, Mira Gunawanza. And we're talking to you all about the mental load. What is it? How do you hold it? How can you solve it? Can tech help you? And what does it look like for women with intersectional identities? So have an eye out. The episodes are coming, and yeah, you're going to fall in love with them, obviously. Now, let's get into today's topic. Do you have a favorite child? Are you the favorite child? I have a favorite child. It's my daughter. She's the only child. Isn't that so obnoxious to say that? I feel like a real jerk, both for having only one child and then also really being arrogant about it. But do you actually have a favorite child? Do you like one more than the other? Or did you feel like when you were growing up in your family, like that there was one sibling that got preferential treatment? And was it you or was it not you? And what did that feel like? On today's episode, we're going to look at research looking at whether parents' differential treatment, if they treat their children different, what does that look like? And eventually I'm going to talk to you about whether they like girls more than boys. I'm going to talk to you about two articles today, both of which are led by and written by Alexander Jensing. But one is Parents Favor Daughters, a meta-analysis of gender and other predictors of parental differential treatment. That one's co-authored with Kell and Jordson Wells. And then a second article, Parental Differential Treatment of Siblings Linked with Internalizing and Externalizing Behavior. And this is also with Alexandra Thompson. Across these articles, basically what they're doing, again, is these meta reviews. I don't know why we're just keep giving you meta reviews, but it is what it is. And we're telling you about the summary of what has been found across the literature. But these are kind of nice because they give you an overview of what academics have found over time in terms of these behaviors. So basically what they're talking about is that, looking across decades of research, we know that parents treat their children differently. And they call this parental differential treatment. There's a couple reasons about why parents would treat children differently. I mean, one is pretty simple, and it's the idea that children at different developmental stages, different ages, just have to be treated differently. You can't treat a 17-year-old the same way you would treat a 2-year-old. That differential treatment will come in just based on the nature of children's ages and what's developmentally appropriate. The other argument is actually siblings or your children can have different temperaments, and this can impact the ways in which parents parent different kids because people are different and children are different. And then the third thing is part of the reason why parents may have differential treatment is in part because, kids are different kids, but it could be the age of the children. It could be birth order. It could be gender. And it also could be the fact that kids have a different perception of how the parents are treating them. So they're kind of talking about all of these coming together, that parents might not see that they're treating their children differently, but the children might perceive that they're being treated differently than their siblings. So it can really matter who is reporting on this. Is it the child reporting that, my brother or sister is treated differently to me? Or is it the parent reporting that I am treating this child different than the others? What does that look like for you, right? When you think about this, if those of you who are currently parents, when you think about your own way in which you interact with your children, do you see differential treatment in your behavior to your children if you have multiple? But if you're a child, when you go back to your child self, do you see that as different? Did you feel like you were treated different than a sibling, or was everyone treated equally? You can see how both of these can create very different narratives and can have very different impacts on children's experiences. They talk a lot about the consequences of, if you experience differential treatment, that it can, in some, it can actually be a response to, sensitive and healthy parenting, understanding that each child needs something different and you have to adapt. But other research has shown that like this differential treatment leads to a range of poor outcomes in kids, that it's poor adjustment, for children and in particular in adolescents. And so what they're trying to do in these research articles is get a little bit of a handle about what's being shown across all of these studies that have looked at this so they can get an idea of some general trends. They want to understand what are the patterns. And they're also interested in whether, if you report having, your parents treated you differently or something like this, is there something that happens in the child in terms of internalizing that? Is there internalization of that experience, or is there some sort of externalization of that experience? Do I punish myself as a result of that? Do I punish others or behave in different ways as a result of that feeling? They talk a little bit about this social comparison theory, the idea that you are comparing yourself to others, that it's like this innate dimension of being a human, is that I look to others to see how I am doing, and that can impact my well-being. And they highlight that research shows that, if you're comparing yourself to someone who's more similar to you, that tends to have different outcomes than if you compare yourself to someone who's a little bit older or someone who's a little bit younger. But if you're making lateral comparisons, someone like me, it can impact the way in which that gets internalized or externalized. I mean, I don't know if this has happened to you, but like sometimes if there's someone in my peer group, and we've done podcasts on this, right? Where if you're comparing someone to someone like you, sometimes it can make you enraged to their behavior. But if it's a child or someone way older, the same behavior is more tolerated. So this social comparison of who's your comparative group is really critical. There's this idea that if, children might receive better treatment, they might get more affection, they might have less conflict, and that it might, depend on where they are in the birth order, that, they might feel better in terms of their self-concept and their well-being if they get more of this positive reinforcement. But if they get poorer treatment, then it might, create these comparisons that damage their well-being. And especially if they're looking up or down generationally. My older sibling is treated well, I'm not treated well, what's wrong with me, vice versa. So this is the big kind of questions. There's also this idea of equity theory. I've talked to you about this like a million times, but it's this idea that anything other than equality creates tension within groups, that really what we're trying to do is, have an equal treatment. And if I get more, the interesting thing about equity theory is like, if I get more than my fair share, or if I get less than my fair share, people get anxious about that. So you often think like, God, I want to get more, but that can create an anxiety. If you're getting more than maybe your brother or sister, that can create anxiety too. Or if you're getting less, like it makes sense if you're getting less, or you're being deprived, that you're stressed out about that. But the interesting thing is the research shows even if you get more, this might have happened to you. Like if you can see you're getting preferential treatment, but someone like you, your brother, your sister, someone you love is not, it can also create anxiety in both directions. And what we often want is just parity, like everyone to have the same. So what they're doing across these two studies, and both are similar, but kind of drawing upon a different data set, I will say, is they're using all of these articles. They're doing, again, a meta-analysis of all the available documents on these types of topics. So they're going out and trying to find everything they can find, and then restricting it based on criteria, and then seeing if there is some sort of trend across them. So for the study I'm going to talk to you about right now, they have 2,890 effect sizes. And that's like looking across what everyone else has found in their studies to see if the findings are similar. So like if I write a research project study and I find that men make more money than women, and they look at the amount of money, it's $5, and then they go to another one and it's $10 and $15. They're bringing all of those together to see if they're going in the right direction and if there's a pattern across the effect sizes. So they're taking that from 88 sources nested within 43 samples. And what they're basically saying is we're getting across all of these studies about 26,451 unique people, because they're taking my data and some other scholars' data and some other scholars' data, and they're bringing that all together. So what do they find? They find that basically that social comparison theory is right, that if you are a child who received worse treatment, relative treatment from a sibling, you end up with more internalizing and externalizing behaviors. That less favored siblings, they are often comparing with their more favored siblings or making those comparisons, and that these comparisons can be damaging to their self-concepts, and it can result in unhealthy internalizing and externalizing behavior. If I am a kid who's watching one of my siblings get more than me, or I'm treated worse than them, I feel worse about myself, and I am internalizing and externalizing unhealthy behavior. Siblings who are reported better behavior, if they were favored, they end up with a healthier sense of self. And this is linked to less internalizing and externalizing behavior. So the golden child, the favored child, is actually feeling healthier about themselves, and they have better outcomes in terms of these behaviors internalizing and externalizing it. One of the other things they find is that this unequal parental treatment can create these feelings of injustice within the family. And what it does is it creates conflict, tension, and rivalry. And all of this can also make everyone feel worse, internalizing and externalizing behavior. The other thing they found in the study was like it really did matter who was reporting, that if the child is reporting about the parent's behavior, it's more tightly associated with worse feelings, internalizing and externalizing behavior. And that makes sense, right? Because kids are picking up and scanning everything that's happening in the home in a way that is more sensitive, perhaps, to what the parents are seeing. They have a different perspective, they have a different lens. And so it really matters if it's the child's report. If it's the child's report about differential treatment, that is more tightly linked to worse internalizing and externalizing behavior. So this is what they're finding in the first study. In the first study, they're finding like actually parental differential treatment that actually is harmful. It's more harmful if the children are reporting that their parents are treating them poorly, right? That there's differential treatment in the family, and it leads to worse outcomes for those kids. In the next study, they look at 4 additional things. They look at birth order. Are you the oldest child or the youngest child, right? Like where you're oldest, middle, or youngest. They're looking at the gender of the child, and then they look at the temperament and personality of the child. So is this all, in fact, just the fact that like we like the oldest the most or the youngest the most? We like daughters more than sons, and we really like kids that are, open, conscientious, extroverted, agreeable, and have less neuroticism. So this is what they're doing. When they look at temperament and personality, I already gave these to you just now. See what I did? Is they're looking at the big 5 factor model. And this is the idea that, there's 5 different aspects that we like, 5 big personality components: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, and neuroticism. And they're drawing on this literature that's looking at, the fact that openness, whether you're open or not, whether you're conscientious or not, and whether you're extroverted or not, like whether that actually leads to greater treatment or not amongst the kids. And what they expect to find is that easier to parent temperaments, so children who are less negative and more positive and who are highly conscientious, will get better treatment. So this is the idea, right? That these kind of traits make for easier parenting, and that they'll lead to favored treatment amongst the children. They expect that things like openness, extroversion, and neuroticism are going to be linked to less favored treatment, but I don't know. Like, I'm a little bit interested on this. They're drawing from previous literature, but I think there is something wonderful about having an open and extroverted child, and neuroticism sometimes can be a sensitivity that comes from our children to help us better capture the vibrations of the world. And so I'm curious why they have those, as I know there's literature showing that those can be negative, but I don't know that parents would say those are necessarily negative. What they do is they take 30 articles from 14 databases, and then they see what are kind of the results across. What they find is that when parents exhibited differential treatment based on control or autonomy, then older siblings tended to be more favored. So if the parents wanted a child who was in control and autonomous, they gave older siblings better treatment. The effect size was small to medium. So they basically say parents tend to be less controlling or grant more autonomy to older siblings. Now that is like feels obvious, right? Like this is just a transition into older ages and kids can do different things, but there is a perception that the older siblings got to do more because they were older. They got more autonomy, they got more control. The next thing they find is that parents report slightly favoring daughters over sons. So net of everything else, parents are reporting that they do slightly favor their daughters over their sons. They actually find that the children don't perceive that to being happening. Like the children reported no differences. And so if you ask the daughters, are you the preferred child to your brother? They're like, no. But when they ask the parents are like, yes, she is. Can we take a pause on that for a moment? So basically what's going on is that women are socialized, especially from a young age, to be good, likable, loving, conscientious, helpful. And so daughters are doing this behavior likely through gender socialization, and the parents like it. They're favoring the daughters slightly over the sons. But because women are socialized to never feel like they're enough, the daughters don't actually feel good in that. They're doing all these things that the parents favor. The parents are saying that they like it, and the daughters are still feeling terrible in it. I mean, I know I'm dramatizing the results, but like that is how that feels to me is like women can do everything, and people are happy, and they still don't feel like people like them. They still don't feel like they're favored. They still don't feel like they're doing enough. They still don't feel like they are the preferred child. And the parents are like, yeah, I love that child. There is some sort of disconnect that's coming through this research, even at this early age, where you can see that actually girls at that age, even though they're doing all that, don't feel like they're doing enough. I am editorializing these findings, but I will say that is what that reads to me, is that women never feel like they're doing enough to be likable. And that's showing up in this research. The other thing they find is that parents like conscientious children. And they also like agreeable children, but these are very small effects. And then they find that there's actually no impact for openness, extroversion, and neuroticism. So basically, parents don't care. I mean, if the kids are open or not, if they're extroverted or introverted, if they're neurotic or not. So this is actually something that doesn't actually matter. What are they finding in this research? They're finding that parents do have differential treatment of their children. Sometimes it's based on the age and stage. That's developmentally important. But if it actually is something that causes conflict and tension, the person that internalizes it most is the child. It matters if the child is reporting that or not. They find that actually, yes, daughters are slightly preferred to sons, but the daughters don't feel that way. They actually don't feel like they are the child that is the most loved, the most preferred. And so there's something happening in the socialization process that doesn't allow girls to feel exceptional, feel special, feel like they are the preferred child. They feel like they're equally loved to their brothers. They're also finding that some of this stuff doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if your child is extroverted. Conscientiousness does kind of matter. It gives you some preferential treatment, but some negative treatment too. And so that stuff doesn't really matter. The truth of the matter is that parents probably love children based on who the children are, and they can probably see the unique and different characteristics of each. And so what should we take from this? We should understand that actually your behavior as a parent can be pretty critical in terms of how your children are feeling, but also on some level that parents are loving their kids exactly as they are, exactly who they are, for what they are. I think what this research is showing us, it's so clear, is that we have this clear cultural narrative that there is always one favored child, that we always love one. It's always the oldest or the youngest or the middle or the smartest or the most athletic. And the research is so mixed on this, right? The effects are kind of marginal. Like it's not showing that. It's showing that, sometimes we like daughters a little bit more. And yeah, sometimes we like conscientious children, but that's not always true. We don't really care. And so we have this cultural narrative that there is this favored, this is preferred. But then when we go to the research, it's much messier. It's much more complex. The one thing that is clear is that if your kids feel like you are treating them different than a sibling, an older or younger sibling, they are internalizing that and feeling awful. That is something that you can work on in your partnership. You can check in with your children. You can ask them, I love, you can sense check when you say things or if things are paining them, you can ask. And that's a moment of reflection that we can do to help our children feel more safe, more stable, and more loved in this world. But let me be clear, the research is unclear. And so let's drop some of this harmful narrative about preferential treatment and favorites, right? That it's mixed. And let's also acknowledge that we come together and love different people in different ways. And that is really important. So How did it work for you? What's happening in your life? You can find us on all the socials. You can let us know what you think. And we're always available on LinkedIn or on, Instagram at Prof. Leah or at Misperceived to hear your feedback. Just something to note is that we are so lucky and grateful that this series is being supported by the Melbourne Public Humanities Initiative at the University of Melbourne. Thank you for listening to us. Thanks to all your likes, your subscribes, your follows. We are getting some money to support this. Thank you, the Melbourne Public Humanities Initiative. We are so eternally grateful. If you like this episode, if you have comments about this episode, if you hate this episode, tell us. Give us some comments on our Misperceived podcast or at Prof. Leah on Instagram. And also, thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week. Mwah. As per always, thank you for spending time with me on Misperceived, where you don't need a PhD, you just get to come hang out with me. Mwah. This podcast was produced with the support of the incredible Sophie Squires, the wonderful Kate Danger, the fantastic Rich Berner, and the one and only, the best ever made, Serena Reagan. I would like to acknowledge that our podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.